So earlier we talked about earlier in the semester, I suppose, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about what made the experience of the balcony a little different than some of the other plays. But we also should talk about what makes this particular play different than the others that Ionesco has done, right? Especially the one that we already saw when we looked at the Bald Soprano, but also how it differs from some of the other plays within the theater of the absurd. I think this one definitely, if you saw it in person, if you watched the film, it is a more approachable play, right? It makes more sense. There's a lot more logic to what's happening, right? Within Waiting for Godot, within Endgame, within The Bald Soprano, we have a lot of very absurd situations and situations that we don't quite understand how people have found themselves in these situations. There's not a lot known about what's going on, right? And it doesn't feel like there's as much metaphor as there is simply unusual activity and things to sort of contemplate and think about and consider, right? Dialogue is going to be a little bit more obscure, right? In the balcony, right, we have a very understandable play, right? A very bizarre scenario, but an understandable play with characters that are maybe a little more relatable, right? That they talk to each other in sort of normal texts, right? Some of them sort of monologue to themselves a little bit, but overall we understand where the play is going and what it sort of represents. There's a lot of symbolism there, right? And I think we have something similar in Ionesco, but maybe in Rhinoceros, right? But maybe a little bit more fun. I guess that's what I could say, is that I think Ionesco is a little bit more fun to read. And Genet and his description of power is a little bit more menacing, right? I think that Rhinoceros does get a little menacing at the end when we sort of see where Berenger has arrived, what his final sort of position is as sort of the lone survivor of this wave of people turning into rhinoceri. And I think that, again, Ionesco remains for me one of the more approachable and one of the more actable plays, right? You're more likely to see an Ionesco being acted out than you are to see a Genet acted out, right? And that's important. Ionesco does not want, especially this particular play, to be obscure. It is fairly clear from the beginning that he wants us to be able to process and understand this play with a minimum of distraction from what we might consider to be just bizarre and weird. Is the play weird? Sure, absolutely it is. It's a theater of the absurd, and it leans into that absurdity and the absurdity of the situation and the absurdity of the fact that we don't know why people are turning into rhinoceros and why people are choosing to become rhinoceros and what that process is like, right? There is certainly a fantastical element, and of plays, right, I think the balcony is probably the least fantastical in that nobody is doing anything that is entirely impossible. You could see that being acted out. It would be weird, but you don't have people transforming into animals or becoming different people, right? You've got people who are playing roles, and we're talking through what that means, symbol-wise, right? In Rhinoceros, on the other hand, you do still have this fantastical element. Whether you see it or not, right, depends on what staging you have, right? Is there actually going to be a rhinoceros on stage at some point in time? Maybe, maybe not. But I think what we do see is that Ionesco does want us thinking about the implications of what it means to become a rhinoceros. And so let's start there, right? Our characters. We've talked through already a little bit the fact that we've got Berenger, we've got John, right? If we've read the play, right, then we understand as well that this could be, right, either Berenger or Stanley, right? The movie versus the script written down, right, is a little bit different. And then of course we have Jean in both, right? Right, and that's very important to sort of see that Jean stays the same, right? But right, what we have is, a character in John, very straightforward, straight laced. As comme il faut, as the French would say, right? As he needs to be, right? Conforming to society, dressing well, knowing when to limit his drinking, understanding that being a polite member of society is the most important thing. Berenger, who is lazy, who is unkempt, who is an alcoholic, who is unable to sort of do his life, who admits to John at the very beginning, right, that he does not understand how living works, right? He's tired of life. He gets exhausted by the weight of his own body, right? And John, right, tells him that this is the effects of alcohol, right? I think we are logically able to process that as well, right? That if Berenger is in fact, right, an alcoholic, as he certainly seems to be, and a lazy, sort of sluggard, as he seems to be, that yes, you would get this sort of ennui and this existential, dread, but you would also have some physical effects, right? That you need to exercise a little bit, you need to get out and do some stuff, you need to stop drinking and staying up until all hours of the night, right? So I think we have those two who find themselves opposed, both morally, quote unquote, right? Let's not lean too hard into the morals, but morally and personality wise, they're opposed, right? John wants to engage in spirited debate. He wants to discuss. He wants to talk about culture. Whereas Berenger, he just wants to sort of get through. He wants to get through the day. He doesn't want to think hard about things. And that is our first and probably most important distinction. How does it affect them, though, when we look at the rest of the play? Let's talk about it.